No, it's amazing how fast these months come round. But I'm now talking about the March issue of the Mover magazine. Can you believe it? We were only doing Christmas a few days ago, it seems. But anyway, this is the March issue of the magazine. As always, lots of things to grab your attention. There's one story there that I'd like you to have a look at if you're anywhere in Europe. Now, this story it's actually a UK story, but this is something that is coming to the UK now, but is coming to the rest of Europe very soon. And it's all about contracts of employment. Now, I know this is a bit boring and a bit dry, but sorry about that. But the rules at the moment are that you have a period of grace when you employ somebody to give them a contract of employment. Well, in the future, then in the UK, very soon, I can't remember what the date is, but very soon, there you haven't. You're going to have to do it straight away as soon as they join. And if you don't, then you could be in serious bother. Now, the rest of Europe, that is going to be rolled out anywhere between now and, the 1st of August 2022, depending which country you're in. So do check it out and make sure that you don't fall foul of that, because otherwise you could have a problem. There's a story as well, that one's on page 8, by the way, of the magazine. And on page 16, we've got a story. It's sort of part of a series in a way. I went to see Gros Perron in France a while back, and we did a feature about Gros Perron. Well, the whole sort of thrust of what they were doing was about diversification. And one of the diversifications that they did was to buy a DSP, relocation company, in Paris. And this story, I've called it Diversifying the Diversification, because in effect what they've done is taken that DSP company and converted it into a full-service relocation company. And it's a story a little bit about how they did that and what they've included, and some interesting stuff about the changes in the requirements that companies have, and also with different nationalities entering the country, the different ways in which they need to be treated. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, take a look. That's on page 16. On page 22, there's an interview with my friend Peggy Smith. Now, Peggy, as you're probably aware, she ran the worldwide ERC for many years, and it was a bit of a surprise, I suppose, when Peggy decided to up sticks and leave and join Shift, which is something of a startup organisation. But it's a startup organisation with big ideas, and I was kind of interested to find out a bit more about what Shift was doing, and I think you will be too. And I was also interested to know why she would do that. I mean, why give up a job like that at the ERC to go and do something that sort of speculative, I suppose. Anyway, read the story, you'll find out more about it, and you'll find out why. Our cover story this time is about Santa Fe. It's on page 26, and there's a picture of Jan Blandy on the front cover. Now, I did an interview with Jan at the Santa Fe headquarters in London, which is a building that I know extremely well, because it used to belong, of course, to Interdene. It was built by Victor Bondarenko, and at the time he built it, I was doing the company's PR. And so I was there taking all the photographs and doing all those kind of things at the time. So I sort of feel some kind of attachment, if you like, to that building in London. And I've interviewed many people there. I've interviewed Paul Evans and Lars Iversen and Chris Baker and lots of people. This time it was Jan was in the spotlight. And I know it's not the first interview that he's done for the industry since he took over. But he was I didn't give him a particularly easy time. And he was very forthcoming, far more so than I expected. I expected him to be a little bit guarded, but no, absolutely not at all. Read the story; I think you'd be surprised. And he came up with some thoughts on the future that I've not seen him seen reported before. So do take a look at that. It was on page 26, and oh yeah. Now then, there's a story on page 32, and I just would like everybody to read it, please. Even if you don't read anything else, read the story on page 32. Now, it's about well, it's about why. No, let me approach this in a different way. It's written by a young lady in South Africa who works for Stutterfords. She's called Teshana, and her boss described her as a packer, supervisor, saleswoman, and Girl Friday, which covers a multitude of sins. And from what I can see, she seems to be a girl every day. Because she's obviously a woman of many talents. And what she didn't realise, I don't think, until I told her, is she's also a good writer. She's not a trained writer. She's never done anything before, as far as I'm aware. But she wrote down a story about what it means to be a mover. And, it's a different angle entirely. She looks at the whole thing from a very sort of personal point of view. Not her personal point of view, but the personal point of view of some of the people involved. Now, this is in South Africa, but there's one of the characters that she uses as an example is the effect of somebody moving house on the nanny of the household, who has been bringing the children up for the last 9 years, and then the family just decide to move. And these kids that she's been looking after and loving all this time have gone. I mean, how do you deal with that? I mean, you talk about the trauma of moving house. This is extraordinary. And she just looks at the whole thing in a different way. Read the story. It's on page 32. Even if that's the only page you read, please read that story. There's also other stories about, there's one about the future of insurance, which is quite interesting. There's one about the last mile, about how it's possible for moving companies perhaps to get involved in last mile deliveries, which I think is quite good. And there's also an interesting story about the US domestic market that I think you find interesting too. One final thing is yesterday I found out that the FIDE and Omni conferences have been cancelled this year, which I think is very, very sad. I mean, I don't blame FIDE and Omni for doing it, of course. I think they had no choice, frankly, in view of the fact that so many people would have been scared off from going. I just think it's extremely sad that they had to. But anyway, there we are. That's the way it is. I went to the IMA conference recently in Cambodia. Just got back, hence the suntan. No, I was indoors most of the time. And there's a full report in the April issue, but I'll tell you more about that next time. See you then. Bye.